Some questions, please. Gentleman there.
Hi, Lee Brown from Maersk Oil. Ben, I was just intrigued to understand you had so many different nationalities working on such a huge project. We've talked a lot about how we build a culture in for our own companies, but how do we get so many different cultures to interact together, following the same lines?
It's not easy, and actually some of the differences, especially in language, was something that we never completely cracked. But look, you start from the fundamental point that a worker wants to go home safely. And so that builds then the basis for the discussion with them that you have. But also, that's something that's common to everyone. In every culture, everyone is working for the same reason and wants to go home and see their family. So we really leveraged off that and used that as the basis for everything that we did.
Do you feel the same, Tom, with regards to contractors, how contractors can interact together?
Absolutely. That is, as Ben said, that's common language for folks. They may not recognize what to say or how to do it, but that's what they're looking for.
Thank you, if you could.
Hi, a question for Ben. It's Wells Grogan with Maersk Oil. Ben, you mentioned the influence of leadership and that it was also a very long and bumpy road. And I guess the issue is, particularly within leadership, how do you keep yourself honest within a leadership team, particularly when it starts getting bumpy?
Yeah, so I think the reason it gets bumpy first is because getting alignment about where you are and where you want to be isn't always easy. And when you can talk about alignment, but actually inside everyone's head they've got a different picture of what the outcome looks like. So I think that's the first thing. Secondly, there's a period where you're doing all this stuff, but actually you don't see the results and the outcome of all your effort getting any better, and so that's another source of friction. But I think, what we worked on was the fact that we had these very strong structures in place, and just bringing ourselves back to the belief of where we wanted to be, and the belief that if we kept on doing it, we would get there. And without wishing to cause offense to anyone, it is a bit like religion. We needed to believe in the outcome, and that doing this would take us there. And we might not see it tomorrow, we might not see it in a month, we might not even see it in a year, but we'll get there. And so that belief in the outcome. Also, we did have help. We had J&J helping us, and they were coaching some of the leaders and kept bringing them back. And so Tim was mentioning that, these leaders that kind of slope off into the darkness, because they've got competing demands, and that's a very real issue. You have the competing demands of safety and production and costs. But they kept bringing the conversation back to safety and what are you as a leader doing about it. And and there were times where it was uncomfortable because you look at yourself and saying, what am I doing about it? And didn't always enjoy the answer.
So in the context of, just to follow up if I may, in the context of some of the conversations and presentations around this culture of accountability, particularly around the rules piece, did you ever get into a situation about accountability around the commitment piece in terms of consequencing if commitment wasn't being shown?
So I think there's a couple of psychological effects that perhaps people in the room could talk more about, but people got quite competitive and about it, and so that played a role. And shame, if someone else was out at site at 5 a.m, the conversation over the coffee corner would be, I was out at 5 this morning with the CCIC guys. When were you last at a toolbox talk? And suddenly, people start to feel a little bit uncomfortable about that. So I don't think there were particularly tough conversations in the context of you're not committed enough, but peer pressure is a powerful thing, both positively and negatively. But I think we used it in a very positive way.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
Yeah, that was a topic we picked up on a couple of years ago in great depth, wasn't it? The power of peer pressure and the self-perpetuating nature of culture, which can work both ways, of course.
Hi, my name is Doug Gorry from Maersk Oil. without trying to bring up nasty memories and stuff, did you learn anything valuable from talking to the guy who put his hand in the piece of equipment? What I'm trying to get at here is often the accident or whatever happens because of a decision that's made under pressure or a bad judgment call. What did you learn from talking to the guy who lost his hand in the piece of equipment?
Yeah, so we, as you'd expect, we carried out an investigation, and I suppose it was never really clear to us exactly what happened, or exactly why he did it, whether he wasn't aware of the rules or he was aware of the rules and he didn't follow them. But I suppose the biggest learning for me is that, you know, all of the rules don't really matter if at someone's core they don't feel the value of them and they don't feel the necessity to follow them. And also the thing that I think horrified me is that he was told to do what he did by his supervisor, and he didn't feel, you know, he was an experienced guy. This wasn't some guy just off the boat. He'd been, I think he'd been an electrician for 13 years. So he knew he hadn't done lockout tagger. He didn't have the key for the padlock to the switchboard in his pocket, so he knew it wasn't locked out. And the fact that despite knowing all of this, he still did it when he was told to. And so that taught me a lot about the power of supervisors. And ultimately, it told me that we're pretty much all motivated by the same things. You know, this was a guy that had lived away from home for the majority of his life. He had 3 children studying. He had a daughter that was at medical school. You know, so by any family measure, you know, any measure, he was a successful family man. And when I asked him in hospital, you know, can I bring your wife here? Is there anything we can do? He said, well, I haven't phoned my wife because I can't call her and tell her, because how am I going to pay for my children to go through school? So actually the things that he was thinking about are just the same for all of us.
This gentleman here wants to ask a question to take us to
Tom,
coffee.
it's Ben Nielsen from Switzer. I would like to ask you, I know that you are in a service-orientated company, obviously, and you have to meet a lot of different contractors or drilling contractors in often remote areas and so on. It's actually 2 questions. How do you integrate your own safety philosophy into what is going on in a drilling site? And secondly, how do you manage to communicate out to the bitter end, so to speak, in the marine language, to the people you have on site in the remote locations, that the performance expected with regards to safety and health and so on?
Actually, that's the great question there is the first question, and I think I'll relate it to the transformation of the industry, where in the 90s, what we used to see is that our safety performance as a contractor was better for the operators who had better safety expectations. So we were following the lead of the ones who were leaders. And what we realized is that works great on that location, works not so great everywhere else. And so that's when we decided that we had to have our own internal drivers to get to the bitter end, to get to the last person on location, so that we had confidence that our workforce was looking out for their own people on location and not just worried about what somebody else was telling them. And the anecdotal proof that the corporation was making the changes, as we started seeing times when our people were calling in and we were actually shutting down jobs and trying to walk away from jobs because we were being asked to do things that we shouldn't be doing. And that still happens today, where we'll get told on location, we want you to do this. We know it's not the way you normally do your business. And we'll say, look, we can't do it that way. So our indication that there's still pressure out there to do things, and I wouldn't say the wrong way, I'd just say not the proper way in going through a management of change and understanding it. But the driver is, for us, is it has to be internal. We have to make sure that we have safety standards that are uncompromising. Otherwise, we will be at the whim of whoever we work for, and we've got, I can't remember what the last count was, but it was thousands of people that we do work for. And there's a wide variety in safety expectations still to this day from those companies.
And the communication?
And then communication, well, that's where it was imperative for us to drive the leadership aspect of it, because we can't directly reach a message from the CEO down to the front line. We had to make sure that the tone in the middle was right, and that tone in the middle was driven by the tone at the top. So our expectations were that the middle level, and I'm talking even down to the frontline supervisors, that they have to be told what the expectation is for them. So we send them through frontline leadership schools, and that covers safety as part of their frontline leadership skills.
I'm Fan Shuang from Fire Safety Services. I have a question for both of you too. How do you think the role of safety service companies like Fire Safety regarding to your own company's safety culture? Thank you.
Are you talking about a company that provides a service of safety, like a third-party oversight?
Yeah, safety training or crisis management.
Okay. That's the thing, is that I think there's a lot of companies out there provide services because they're areas of expertise. No one company is an expert in everything, which is why you have contractors to do that. So my opinion is that we need to learn from who does things the best, and that's not necessarily one entity to do that. Again, the alignment, I think, is the opportunity for the industry. There may be iterations or different flavors of doing something safely, but there has to be a common understanding and alignment of at least the boundaries for performing some sort of work safely.
Yeah, from my context, the role of contractors is hugely important, as the chart you showed about just the proportion of contractor hours of our total hours. Our culture of safety has to extend into our contractors, and we have to work very closely with them. And it's sometimes a difficult balance, because those companies, for very good reasons, have very strong cultures themselves, and so we need to work with them, but they still need to follow our rules, but we don't want to completely dominate the culture. So it's sometimes a difficult balance.
Please, a round of applause for Ben and Tom.